Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Seneca Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Today's episode is brought to you by Your Clear Next Step and the Changemaker Certification Program.
Would you like to save time by solving the right problem sooner with a realistic and measurable plan? Reduce overwhelm by finding more sustainably productive ways to work? Improve employee morale by creating more positive workdays from within? Stay competitive by tightening your turn or increasing your agility in adapting to changing customer demands? If you said yes to those things, then we have the solution for you.
Interested in becoming a changemaker? Give us a call at 515-442-0545.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Even Better podcast. This is your host, Seneca Waugh, and I'm so delighted to welcome you back. Thanks for spending a little bit of your time with us. I am delighted to welcome our guest, Nick Crable, with us today. Nick, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Seneca. I really appreciate it.
So for those of you who haven't had a chance to meet Nick yet, let me tell you a little bit about Nick. So Nick is here in central Iowa, a fellow business owner right here in Indianola, Iowa. And I am delighted to have made Nick's acquaintance. He and I have a lot of things in common as we as we put out our shingles here in Indianola, as we set our heart to making this community better and stronger and to serving it. We serve in some similar disciplines. And we are just working alongside each other here in the community, making things better. And it was an honor to meet Nick. When I first met Nick, I heard about Nick before I had a chance to meet Nick from a couple of different places with people saying, "Hey, have you heard about this guy, Nick, who just showed up in town? And he's showing up and doing the circuit here in town, meeting people at all the places that you're supposed to meet people in town." And Seneca, you gotta meet this guy because he's working in a lot of the spaces that you're working in, and I think you'd find some synergies. And sure enough, I got a chance to meet Nick, and indeed, there are synergies here. And so I'm delighted to have met you, Nick, and to have spent some time conversing with you. And now delighted to have you as a guest on our podcast. As you are the founder of Agri-Prime Consulting, and you are really working on helping strengthen teams, develop talent, like really look at long-term success for your organizations. Really similar spaces to what we're doing, and partnering in that. And you've chosen to focus in agribusiness, which is just the heart of our the heart of America. Here we are in the heartland, right in the grain belt of the U.S. And I just love that you're doing that. So tell us a little bit about your story, Nick.
Well, I am a child of the Midwest. I'm actually a new Iowan. We've lived here for a couple of years, but relocated from South Central Kansas. Family and I lived there for a number of years. I was born and raised there, so I'd never lived outside of the state, and we came up here for a job a couple of years ago, and it got to the point that I was ready to do my own thing, and so I started Agri-Prime Consulting. But it's been a great move. We're in a great community. I have a 15-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter, both heavily involved in show choir and orchestra and the different choirs and athletics. And it's been a great move for them. My wife, Katya, a number of people around town know her. She's involved with PEO. She's in the Des Moines Civic Orchestra, who are going to be performing Handel's Messiah on, let's see, I think it's going to be December 7th. Mm-hmm. So we're excited for that performance. But yeah, it's a great place to be. I've got to meet a lot of really neat people like yourself. And yeah, definitely we do operate in the same space very much so. But yeah, I think there's a lot of complementary things that we do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I also was enjoying our connections there in music. I had our daughters are just a little bit older than your kiddos, but my kids were in show choir and they were in orchestra, and right, just a lot of similarities and just a lot of love for what this particular community has to offer in that space. This is such a great town to live in, man. I love it here. So I appreciate your entrepreneurial spirit. I appreciate your desire to contribute to the community. Appreciate your desire to give back and to grow grow the community and to use the skills and the resources that you have to make a positive difference for others. I mean, this is you're singing my song here, my friend. This is what we
Appreciate
do,
that.
right? Um,
Yeah, it is.
yeah, so let's talk about the session that the reason that we're talking today as we kind of put this together was looking at your topic around building stronger communities through stronger businesses. So there is a connection here between so my mission as an organization, right? We've talked about this. This is here the Even Better podcast is part of our ongoing mission to help people have better work days so that we can co-create better communities. And tangential right to that, you're talking about building stronger communities through stronger businesses. And I know if we have a better work day, we're going to go home, we're going to sleep better, and we're going to have a better night's sleep.
Yeah.
Our kids are going to wake up and they're going to have a better day at school. Their teachers are going to be happier because the kids are they're more rested, and we're just all around. We're going to have more discretionary time, and we're going to use that time to volunteer and plant community gardens and play in the community orchestra, right? And we're going to sing in church choirs, and we're going to contribute to our communities. And so I know the people are better. Human beings are better when we have better work days. And you also are pointing to another side of this. And so this is part of why we're talking today, is that this when we have stronger businesses, our communities are also stronger. And this is part of what you're doing.
Yes,
So
it is.
so what led you to your mission of Agri-Prime? Why Agri-Prime? What made you start that, and how'd you come to be where you are right now?
Well, there's like everyone, there's kind of a long and winding pathway toward where we're at now. Um, I I grew up in the farmers co-op world. My grandfather was a co-op manager and a consultant, actually, so there was some inspiration there. My father was a co-op manager, and I was going to be a history professor. And so I'm a teacher at heart, and you know how you are when you're 18 years old. You've got everything figured out. You know everything. You don't need to do anything that your parents did. So I went off and was going to be the best history teacher you ever saw.
Yeah.
And I went through and got a series of degrees and was teaching um, for a number of different universities in a part-time capacity. But the pull of rural America and the agribusiness space never really left after being gone from it for a couple of years because I grew up in our local co-op. I'm the oldest of five siblings, and all of us worked at one point in the co-op, either with my father or with my grandfather, helping out with harvest, punching scale tickets, just doing some of the stuff that needed to be done. It was always kind of hard to find people to do during the summertime. When where I was at, it was during wheat harvest, and the whole community shuts down for like 3 weeks to make sure that the crop comes in. And you've got the custom harvesters coming through town, and so the restaurants and the hotels are full, and it's just kind of known. You work until the thunderstorm comes through, or you get the crop out of the ground, one of the two.
One of the two.
And so anyway, long story short, I went back into the co-op world in about 2012, and in doing so, I eventually ended up going back and working alongside my father again. And one of the things I was tasked with there was I was responsible for HR, safety, and communications and IT, just kind of the catch-all, jack of all trades department. But the HR and safety were really kind of in my wheelhouse. And I discovered very quickly, particularly as unemployment was dropping in those areas, that it was very, very difficult for us to find talent and for us to hold on to that talent because we had gotten to a point where unemployment in some of these smaller communities in the counties that we were in, and we're talking about places that were maybe 1,500, 2,000 people. I think the largest community in our territory was 6,500 people. But there were spots that unemployment was 1%. It's really tough to find people when
Yeah.
unemployment is at 1%.
Yeah.
But one thing I notice in these communities, when we start getting to our more remote locations, we had some places that we had an elevator or a fertilizer hub that neighboring town may only be a couple of hundred people. And as a result of that, if you grow up in at least sparsely populated rural America, you know that driving and traveling is just it's a fact of life. You're gonna drive to the neighboring town or two towns over for groceries
Yeah.
or to go to school or whatever it may be. But in some of those places, we were the only employer.
Mm.
And so the five, six, seven people that were employed at that particular facility, I kind of started to realize we owed it to those areas to be as good of an employer as we could possibly be.
Mm.
Reasonably expecting, of course, but pay a good wage, a good salary, have it be a place that people wanted to come work,
Yeah.
that people felt fulfilled, because then, just like within your mission, within your clear next step, is that they're happier, they take that home with them, makes for better domestic life, community life, you name it. I mean, the list just kind of goes on and on.
Yeah.
And so when I started Agri-Prime, as I was kind of thinking through, what am I about?
Mhm.
What's my mission here going to be? Well, I have a background in education. I've always loved teaching. I've always loved um, working with students. Um, and this provides me with an opportunity to be working with students again, though not necessarily from the ages of 18 to 23 like it was before. And I don't have to grade. And that's a real positive. Um, and but then there's also I've always kind of said, and it's a little too broad from a business standpoint, but I think in terms of a overall approach, it works well. I always wanted to help. I like being a part of the community, um, being in it and contributing to it and helping in any way that I can. And I felt with my experience in executive management in the farmer co-ops and with background in education and in dealing with people a lot. And that's really what we're doing. Whether you're manufacturing widgets or bringing in a corn crop, still fundamentally you're dealing with people.
Yep.
And how you make them feel and the opportunities that you provide for them and they provide for you. That's what I wanted to do and be a part of. And so that's where the mission of Agri-Prime comes in, is that the stronger economically that a community is, I think the more vibrant it becomes, and opportunities for everyone. Well, how do you do that? Well, the businesses themselves need to be successful,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of different ways to do that too. Managing your people, getting the right people, offering, and this is one of the areas that I also emphasize is I'll do some financial analysis and feasibility studies and some other kind of dollars and cents type oriented things. Because at the end of the day, when you're talking about business vibrancy, I mean that has to be part of it too,
For
right?
sure. For sure.
So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up to this particular point and why I'm doing what I'm doing, and it's I am learning. You never stop learning, and so I continue to see certain elements, particularly in rural America, that are really troublesome to me.
Mm.
Um, the lack of access to healthy food. There are food deserts out in sparsely populated areas of the United States. The lack of access to efficient education, I think, would be the way to put it. There's a lot of traveling that has to be done in certain areas. There's a number of places in western Kansas, where I grew up, that there's one school in the entire county, and it's struggling to keep its doors open because the numbers just aren't there. So, are we going to have schools out there that are three counties worth all trying to come to quasi-central location, that still, could be a couple hours on the bus. And medical care is another big one.
Yeah.
The lack of access to quality medical care in an efficient manner. All of these things can be helped,
Hmm.
not solved, but helped by a stronger, more vibrant economic community, business community.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you stop and think about the fact that I think it's something like 90, isn't it something like 99% of Americans are employed by businesses that are smaller than 500? Like
Oh, I'm sure. Yes.
we are, if you use the number of 500 employees or less as the definition for a small business, something,
Hmm.
unless my stat is wrong, I think it's 99% of us here in the US are employed by small business. And so then you stop and you go, whoa, what does that do? Your first example was the one in which the whole community or the employer had, maybe 1,200 or 1,500 employees. But you look at even in a community the size of Indianola with 15,000 or so employee or 15,000 inhabitants, you look at a couple of different businesses in there. We got a lot of small businesses that could all be served. How many people are we employing? And then you look at you replicate that community to community, and if we serve these businesses and these businesses are strong and healthy and vibrant, look at how many people we're serving. And then you take that outside of Indianola, and then you go to Milo, and you go to Knoxville, and you go to Pleasant Hill, you go to Pleasantville, you just keep going, and Ackworth and Lacona and Norwalk, you look at these places and you can create vibrant communities because small businesses are stronger and growing and caring for their people and caring for the communities around them.
I tell you, one thing I would add to that too is, as a child of rural America, and some of the research that I've read recently is showing, one of the issues within it is cultural isolation.
Mm.
And the dynamic that you just described is, that spreads to Milo and to Norwalk and to Sheraton and to, a number of the other small communities near us and around us. That helps with that dynamic too.
Yeah.
Getting people more involved and feeling a part of things and in communities that they want to be a part of, and not just survive but thrive. And because frankly, that's we're how many times have we seen the cliche that we're more connected now than we've ever been, and yet we're more isolated at the same time. And to that same vein, um, much like the railroads and the post office and the mail order dynamic that we saw in the 19th century, the internet today is helping to keep some of these uh, places alive, because you can order something off of Amazon and have it shipped to your door. Because I mean, it's kind of hard to tell on screen, but I'm not a small person. I'm about 6'5". I have a size 15 shoe. Prior to the advent of the internet, growing up in Pratt, Kansas, which is 70 miles west of Wichita, we had two, and this is kind of a bygone era too. Think of this: a town of 6,000 people had two independent shoe retailers and a Walmart.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And but and here's the caveat: I wear a size 15. Nobody in town carried a size 15. So shoe shopping was either tennis shoes out of the catalog or a 1 hour one way drive over to Wichita to go get shoes,
Yeah.
because that's just the way it was. And with the advent of the internet, we've lost those two independent shoe retailers there. And so it's even more difficult in that community. However, you can, I can hop on my phone right now, and in 30 seconds, I can have new shoes ordered and they'd be in my door tomorrow.
Yeah.
So,
For sure there's a trade-off in so many different ways. Mm. So
Yeah.
So let's talk about leadership. Let's talk about, because you don't just focus on the numbers. And
No,
when we think about
no.
some places where you and I overlap, there's overlap in the leadership and in the human skills. I think some of the places where we differentiate, you focus on agribusiness in a very specific way, where I sort of broadly focus on lots of different businesses. And I think you also do a little bit more with the financial business consulting in ways that we don't specialize in that. Certainly, we're happy to we're happy to help and consult, but that's not an area of specialization for us. Um, but where we have a lot of strong overlap is in the idea around developing people and developing equipping leaders for with leadership skills, with communication skills, with the things that they need to connect as humans. So let's talk there a little bit. Where have you found some of your like how did you grow your skills in that area? And what are you seeing? What are you seeing as some of the most powerful things? Well, let's talk about your background first. How did you cut your teeth in leadership development?
Well, in leadership development, it was when I first came back to the industry in 2012. I worked for a couple of years for a cooperative insurance firm.
Mm,
The co-ops in Kansas owned a insurance agency that was kind of the big umbrella was it was a risk management and risk control agency. And insurance was a big part of what they did. But I worked for them as a safety director. And then they sent me to a number of leadership academies, programs. And when I went over into working at Kansas Co-op was the name of it in 2015, um, I continued on that path for myself. I I told my dad and I told some of the other folks I was working with, look, if I'm going to do a good job with this and I want to do a good job, I need to continue developing my skill set because frankly, I just don't know it.
mhm.
I know enough to know the specific sliver of duties that I've been given. But if you want to see more out of me, and in fact, I want to be more than what I do, I've got to keep going through it. And so I took some courses that were offered by a very large cooperative that is about kind of helping and that's the thing with the co-op structure. There's all kinds of, there's co-ops that are members of co-ops that are members of co-ops. We happen to be kind of down on the low rung of that organization that the farmers were our owners. And then we were members of CHS was the one I went through the most based out of Minneapolis.
Okay.
So when you see for folks that are not involved in agribusiness, if you're driving along a road and stop at a gas station that says Cinex, that's a division of CHS. They're an extremely large cooperative.
Okay.
They had a lot of because they saw the same dynamics that we're talking about right here. That it's going to be hard to find and attract talent into the cooperative system, and so we need to develop the leadership at these places as well as we can, because if our members are stronger, that's going to make us stronger as a cooperative. It's all of
Sure.
us. There's a lot of synergies there.
Mhm.
So there was that dynamic, just personally seeing how much it affected me and improved my performance. And then there's two other stories here too. One is more broad that we started having our employees. We didn't have a real strong education program, and my HR manager and I worked on building something. And it wasn't a whole lot that we were doing internally as much as, okay, how are we going to identify the people that are going to be the future leaders or the current leaders in this company? But then what are we going to send them to? We didn't quite have the assets within our company to provide that for them. We could serve as a resource. Hey, you got any questions? Just come ask me. But in terms of intentional development, we started with the third party side of things, having somebody else do the development, and we would help identify, and if anybody expressed interest through it, and so on and so forth. But one single most important story that I have was, and this was how green I was in a financial sense. Kansas, when I first got there in 15, we were in the middle of a merger. We had taken on another co-op with about 4 locations. And by the end of that first year, we had 16 different satellite locations and about $400 million in sales. And my title at the time was the chief compliance officer. I eventually, by the time I left, I was the chief operations officer. I went in about a month, 2 months to my role, and I sat down in our CFO's office, who I knew him a little bit. We weren't good friends at the time. We eventually came to be. And I said, Brad, I need to develop my financial knowledge to be better at my job. What do you suggest I do? And can you help me with that? And he said, "Oh yeah, I'd be more than happy to show you some pointers here and there." And he said, "What do you think you need help with?" And remember, I said I was going to be a history professor, and so this was only a couple of years left after leaving teaching. I said, "Well," and I thought for a minute, sitting there in his office, and I said, "I don't know the difference between an income statement and a balance sheet." And I was honest about it. That was the honest to goodness truth. And he, to his enduring credit, he could have looked at me and said, "Oh, okay, boss's kid. All right. Yeah, well, I guess I better help you out." Wasn't that at all. He saw an opportunity there for somebody who wanted to improve, wanted to grow, wanted to learn more. And so instantly he said, "Well, I can help you with that right now." And he explained the differences and what they represented and stuff. And he said, "Why don't you come by this office?" And Friday afternoons aren't very busy. So why don't you come by here every couple of weeks and we'll just kind of get you started and I can tell you some directions to go. And he was invaluable toward my career. I would not be sitting here being able to do what I'm doing right now were it not for that singular meeting and him not laughing me out of his office, because he
Oh,
would have been entirely within his rights to do so.
right.
Um, and so seeing that openness
Mhm.
within the leadership in that company to share knowledge and improve people around them, because a rising tide lifts all ships.
Right.
And I like to think I did a pretty decent job while I was there, but it was a result of the people around me and us working together and developing one another's skills
Yeah.
for all of us to get better at our jobs.
So that particular story speaks to about three things that I want to highlight because I think they're so important as we're elevating the people around us and as we're thinking
Mm-hmm,
about our own skills and what we're bringing to the table. So in one sense, you were demonstrating curiosity, which I think is just so important, right? We can't
mm-hmm,
if we're not demonstrating curiosity in our day to day, even if we're not feeling curious all the time, we got to show curiosity.
mm-hmm.
Like just
Yeah,
just just demonstrate that curiosity in our
there are some
workplaces.
days it's just like I just can't. No,
I
I'm
just
no more.
Right. I
I'm
just
gonna
can't.
I'm gonna shut it down for
I'm
the
gonna shut it
day.
down.
Yeah,
Some days you're feeling saturated, and I get that. I mean, come on, we're recording this in December of 2025. It's been a long, hard year. I'm not curious. Frankly, I don't want to know what's going on out there anymore, right? And
yeah,
I get that. I honor that. I'm tired. We're all tired. I get that. But demonstrating the curiosity, especially so if you're listening to this and you're in a workplace and you're trying to think to yourself, how do I elevate? How do I grow? How do I elevate myself in my organization? How do I encourage someone around me to elevate themselves? How do I bring someone up in the organization? Curiosity is just a really great way to do that. Demonstrating
so,
curiosity to ask the question. And I think you also paired that, Nick, in that story with a fair amount of courage. Because curiosity, there are safe places to be curious. And then curiosity paired with courage that says, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know the difference between this and that.
start.
I don't know where to start. And that courage that says I need help. And then that courage has to also be met with a willingness to elevate and a desire to invest, a desire to pour in, a desire to. And we've all heard the story about the folks who were talking about, well, what if we invest in our people? What if we train them? And what if we give them all this training and development and then they leave? And the counterpoint being, what if we don't train them and they stay?
Yeah,
Right. which is
We,
exactly
we,
what we don't
we
want, right?
stick ourselves with the duds. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that counterpoint that says, so I commend both you and the leader that you're talking about, who's now become your friend, that counterpoint that says if you hear someone demonstrating curiosity, if you see someone and witness someone demonstrating that courage, then the counterpoint that I also have to offer is reward that, right? Be willing to invest in that, be
Mm.
willing to foster that sense of development, be willing to equip them with what they need. And maybe it's resources, maybe your organization has the access to invest in that person with internal resources and training and development. Maybe it's spending on external resources and development. Maybe you have neither of those, and all you can do is say, hey, we're pretty quiet on Friday afternoons. Why don't you come back and we'll
Yeah.
chat, right?
The other thing I to that end, there's two things that kind of jump out at me as we're talking about this within a business dynamic or just any group of people. When somebody says we need to improve the culture around here, or we have a great work culture, or how do you get people to stay?
Mhm.
Well, if it's just throwing more cash at them, guess what? There's always going to be somebody else that can pay more. But the other side of that is it's not going to be just having pizza every other Friday in the break room. It's an all encompassing effort to where everybody understands the goal. Everybody, you kind of hold each other accountable, but you root for each other. There's entire industries devoted to trying to figure this kind of thing out. We're not going to be able to hit upon everything in the next minutes, but it's an all encompassing thing. And it's kind of, we all have our pet peeves. Mine was when people would come to me and say, we need to improve communication around here. It's like, okay. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to have a bologna sandwich on white bread with mustard, and I might even have a bag of chips. And if I'm really feeling frisky, I'm going to have a Diet Coke. And so technically, I'm improving communication. All right. We need to be more specific about some of these things. And that's kind of how I feel when somebody says we need to improve culture or how are we going to improve retention? You've got to start looking in all different areas there. And there's no any one thing with that. And that's why I think what we're doing, I don't just offer an emotional intelligence through disc course and say this is going to resolve all of your issues. And
Right.
and you don't offer that all we do is go around and sell emotional intelligence.
Nope.
No,
Nope.
that's really important, but you can't just do that.
Nope.
Right. And even the three or four different suites that I have to offer, that's not it. And sometimes it's as important as well, it goes into let me back up. The other thing that I'm reminded of that I always used to say is, and I'd argue with some other people that I used to work for. And what I'm not saying devalues education, because especially my background, I'm a huge believer
Yep.
in education, huge believer in it. But even if it's grade school education, if it's liberal arts education, if it's a little bit more specific, I am not qualified to step into a role with the Iowa Department of Wildlife and be a marine biologist. No,
No.
you're not going to teach me that job. I do not have the base knowledge that it requires.
Okay.
But there are a lot of jobs that the whatever your degree was in doesn't really matter. I mean, some of it does, and you bring a lot of different things to the table with that. And where I'm going with this is it is upon the business when you get a new employee, you need to teach them that job.
Hmm.
You need to educate them and help build them up because what they're coming in with, that's just the baseline. Don't expect them to come in and all of a sudden be one of your rock stars day one. They may be fantastic and everybody loves them. They're doing a great job, but there's a reason why everybody jokes about the new guy
Yep.
because they just don't know. Okay, so where's the responsibility? And this is what we're talking about with culture, right?
Mhm.
Where's the responsibility for that? Where's the expectation? That starts at the top in building a culture of no, you're not going to push that person off to the side and just say, they'll figure it out. We're all going to work together to make sure and there's a number of different ways to do it. Let's identify a group of people to go through this training. Let's make sure that I was at a college one year that they assigned a new faculty mentor
Hmm. Yep.
that was completely outside of my department. They were
Yep.
completely on the other side of campus. I would not have interacted with them but they said, no, you're going to meet with that person every 2 weeks just for a cup of coffee and to just kind of see how things are going
Yep. Yep.
and that sort of thing. And yeah, so anyway, it comes back to kind of what we're talking about, that development and that education. It is really important for businesses to be doing that for all the reasons that we've talked to right up to this point, for the health of the business, the health of the community, the quality of customer service, the happiness of the customers, you name it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if we were, and just keeping an eye on the clock here, we're getting close to time. If we were to bring to the listeners some sage counsel from you in your journey so far as an entrepreneur, in your journey as a business owner, in your journey as a someone who helps others invest in their communities and their leadership developments, we've certainly heard some themes and some patterns. What's something that you've been working on and shaping up in sage counsel these days?
Um, I think it kind of comes from my self-deprecating nature. I take what I do seriously, but I don't take myself too seriously all the time. And that is, somebody will say, oh, I feel like I should know this. And I'll say, hey, listen, I can't believe how dumb I was 2 months ago. That you look back on it. We all have that you think back to that one moment. It's like, oh man, I can't believe that I made that mistake or did that. But it's a mantra that it's kind of built around: never stop learning, never stop developing, never stop looking for ways to improve. And it can be small little incremental steps, or it can be, huge leaps of faith. But it is. I can think of a number of examples that I'm not going to share because I don't necessarily want to make them public. Of a couple of months ago, I was like, I can't believe I wasted time on that, or I can't believe I decided to do that. And that didn't work. And I think it's magnified when you're a small business owner, because you are watching those dollars and cents so much more closely, that if I do make a mistake, or pulled the trigger on something that now I kind of wish I hadn't, I can look in my records and be like, right there is where there's that little dip. That was because of that choice. And that choice isn't going to be made again when we come around to next April.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Yeah. And as a business owner, that movement from solopreneur to business owner to right, when we have then teams, we become fiercely then protective of our resources, our time, and our dollars, and whatever else it is that's under
Oh
our scope
yeah,
of control,
yeah.
which then the people working for us start to interpret as control freak tendencies. And they're not control freak tendencies. They're the evidence of lessons that we have learned in sometimes painful
Yeah.
ways, and we don't want to make those mistakes again. They're not to be
Very painful
confused.
ways. Yeah, could not agree more.
Just be gentle, right? Be
Yeah,
gentle on those business
yeah.
owners who look like control freaks. They're not control freaks. They're responding to lessons that they learned perhaps the hard way with their very hard-earned dollars.
I
Oh,
like that. I'm gonna remember that distinctly. Yes,
yeah, when you need that one, just pull that one back out.
I will. I will.
Oh man, what fun. Oh, Nick, I really, really appreciate your time here with us today. If our listeners want to reach you, of course they can reach out to us and we will connect them with you. Other ways
Yep.
that they can find you, what's the best way for them to find you?
If you go on my website, it's agriprimeconsulting.com. No dashes, just all one word. Agriprimeconsulting.com. I have a number of different, hey, contact us forms, or um, pages that you can get a hold of me. Has my contact information there. And then my email address is Crable in my last name, first initial, at agriprimeconsulting.com.
Fantastic. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate you. And this would not be the Even Better podcast if I didn't ask you my trademark question, which is what's making you even better these days?
Mm. Not forgetting and appreciating the love of my family.
Oh,
We just had a wonderful Thanksgiving. They've been supportive. My kids will ask me from time to time, "How's the business going, Dad?"
oh,
And it's just nobody does anything alone. And having my family there with me, particularly being reminded of that at this particular time of year in the holidays, that's making me better.
that's beautiful. I love that. What a wonderful way to wrap that up. Nick, thank
Yeah,
you. Thanks
thanks.
again for your time. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I cannot express enough the appreciation I have. So thank you.
Absolutely. This is absolutely my joy. So, to our listeners, thanks so much for listening in. This has been an episode of the Even Better podcast with our guest, Nick Crable. And we are so glad to have had you joining in. And on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step, we hope the rest of your day is even better.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.